All right, it's Coach Tyler here. I'm going to be talking all about the squat. One thing we need to know is that the human genome is like 99.9999% identical from human to human. However, there is that 0.000001 that makes us all different. And part of that is our anatomy and our genetic makeup. So we have to squat right for our anatomy. Everybody has a ball and a socket joint, right? So you have the ball, you have the socket, and that femur head goes right into the acetabulum, so it's able to move around. It has really good suction. And it allows your hip to go forward and backward and side to side and all around in circular directions. However, some people's socket joint is more like a plate, and that ball has a lot of room to move around. Some people's socket joint is more like a bowl, and there's less room for it to move around. So that is going to change the dynamic of your squat. It's going to change how low you go. It's going to change the range of motion that your knees need to go through, where your feet should be at, how far your toes should be pointed out. And so we're going to go through some of the mechanics with that. Number one, we're going to do an assessment with Coach Scotty to find out if you can squat, how low should you go, and we're going to figure out what is the best squat for you to get in with your body and your anatomy. What's the difference between a squat and a deadlift? A deadlift is fundamentally a back and forward motion using the hips. It's maximal hip, minimal knee bend. A squat is more or less an up and down motion. You are still going to be doing a hinge from the hips, but then we're going to drop those knees down as far as they can go as well. Think about that as maximal hip, maximal knee. How low should you go? I tell people to go as low as you can with pain-free range of motion. For the longest time, the fitness industry told people above the knee, below the knee with the hips, right at the knee with the hips, but really wide limit range of motion. If you're able to go low with a neutral spine and a flat back, then we are good to go. Go as low as you can, pain-free range of motion. If there's pain, you might want to find out why that pain is happening. And that may be by seeing a physical therapist or a doctor. And then we can start implementing the things into the Orange Theory classes and make those modifications and those options for you to perform better without pain. Where should your toes go? Should they be pointing forward, pointing out? It depends. Your body and your anatomy is going to dictate where your toes should point. The number one factor is it comfortable? And are you able to sit low with that squat without any pinching through the knees, the hips, or the ankles? Should your knees go over your toes? In short, the answer is yes. The knees should always track over the toes. How far should they go over your toes? It depends on your body's mechanics. Some people with longer femurs will go a little bit further than the toes. However, if your ankles are coming off the ground, you might be going too low. We want to make sure that we keep a flat foot the whole time. So think about whole foot, whole time. We want to make sure that we're able to keep that heel down. We want to keep a talon with our feet. You want that heel down, the big toe down, and that little toe down. They should be gripping into the floor, tearing the floor apart, creating more stability through the hips. If you ever feel like you're falling backwards in your squat or you're collapsing forward and backwards, a lot of times that may mean that you have a longer femur. That's this bone right here. So one thing that you can do is actually to go wider. Sometimes a wider squat is a better squat. So it allows you to sit a little bit deeper. One important thing to know about the squat is for us to get distal mobility, we need proximal stability. So if you refer back to Coach Tony's core bracing video, the more that you can brace the core and stabilize here, the more mobility and the lower you're going to be able to get through down here. This needs stability, the hips need mobility, the knees need stability, the ankle joint needs mobility, and then of course the big toe also needs mobility for all of these ranges of motion to happen maximally without pain or compensations. So if we're able to stabilize our core, everything else in the body is going to move naturally as well. So number one thing is watch Coach Tony's core bracing video and apply that to your squat to allow you to go deeper with more weight, and you're going to get stronger with less pain.
So this diagram kind of shows you exactly what I'm talking about. One joint needs stability for the next joint to get mobility. And if you're lacking one or the other, your body's going to learn how to compensate, and it's going to affect your movement patterns, which could lead to injury.
All right, we got Coach Scotty here. He's gonna do a rock back and forth for me from a tabletop position. So Scotty, go ahead and push your hips back as far as you can. Keep going, good. Now go ahead and go forward as far as you can. Just rock back and forth. Do you have any pain through any type of range of motion through your knees, your hips, or your ankles? Anything going on here?
Nope.
No pain? Okay. So Scotty, I'm gonna have you go ahead and sit back a little bit. So go ahead and all the way back. Now if you guys notice here, he's starting to round his low back. It probably means his hips are probably a little bit too low for a squat. Go ahead and bring your hips up a little bit. Right about there, nice flat back. What this shows you here, this is a squat that is not loaded and his back is flat. This is gonna be his lowest range of motion that he can go through without having any kind of compensations. All right, so now we're gonna go through and show you how to find your optimal squat range of motion with your biomechanics. And this is gonna immediately drop down your squat at least a couple of inches. Now I'm going to measure this. I don't expect you to measure it. You can still follow along with the testing that I'm gonna do for this first portion. Then I'm gonna measure for Coach Scotty and put him through the measurements in a vertical position. So you'll see this happen over. All right, the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have Coach Scotty keep his leg straight and just loosen up his other limb here. You can do this on your own or with a partner. We're gonna bring up his leg as far as we can, all the way up to his chest until it stops. And I'm not gonna push it any further than that right there, making sure this other hip stays on the ground. Now from here, his hip joint will actually allow him to open up his hip just a little bit, and then once it stops there, once we get that scouring down and it doesn't move anymore, we'll turn his toe out in the same direction as his knee is pointed. Now I'm gonna have him hold this position here, and then we're gonna go ahead and do the same thing with the other side. So I'm gonna bring his leg up, nice and comfortably, as far up as it'll go straight, and once it stops moving straight, we're gonna push it out to the side just a little bit. That's as far as it's gonna open up, and then his toe is gonna be pointing the same direction that his knees are going. So the toes and the knees go in the same direction. Now what I can do here is I can actually take measurements, and I will, because we're gonna put Scotty in the same exact position when he stands back up. So from here, what I'll measure is I'll measure from knee to knee. I have Coach.
So at this point, I'm actually going to take measurements. I'm going to measure from knee to knee. I'll measure from heel to heel. I'll measure the distance between his heel and his butt, or the butt to the floor. I'll also measure how far his toes point out in inches from the heel. After the measurements were taken, I took Scotty into his actual squat by using the measurements. In the left hand, you'll see a picture of a squat that isn't actually a Scotty squat. It's just a squat that you typically see in the gym, toes forward, knees forward, sitting in a chair pose. And you can see the range of motion from the hip to parallel to the floor. And then the second squat on the right, you can see parallel to the floor and how much lower the hips actually were able to get to the floor based on his biomechanics and his anatomy. We took the measurements from the last slide, we put him into action, and as you can see, his hips drop significantly lower, inches. One other assessment you can do at home is to check your ankle range of motion. All you need is a tape measure, a wall, and your body. You'll kneel down 5 inches away from a wall, and that's where you'll place your toe. And then you'll see how far you can push your knee toward that wall over the toes before your ankle comes up. And there's a pass-fail rating with this. Typically, you want to be about 5 to 4 inches away. A passing rating is if the knee can touch the wall 5 or more inch distance, the heel remains down, the knees are aligned with the feet, and there's no pain. And the failing is exactly opposite of that.